Okay, so doing circle slash for this, just as a refresher, circle slash, we're picking, or it's where we have two groups. So we have to put our variables either being picked or not picked. And in this game in particular, we see that with, we have to select exactly 4 out of the 6 students to do this architect or this history thingy, archive stuff. So for our circle and our slash, we're going to say slash means that they are not picked, and circle means that they are picked. This game can be done a number of ways. I've done this game with like a T chart almost, like I have my ins over here and my outs over here, but we can also do this with circle slash. So if the circle slash way is kind of confusing, try to do it with the table chart and that'll help. Okay. I think I have the hiccups. Okay, we're just gonna persevere. Okay, so we have 4 students will be assigned to a history project in which they will search archives from the years 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of the 4 years will have exactly 1 student assigned to it, and then 6 students are assigned for, or possible for this project. So we have L, M, O, R, T, Y. And for this type of game, this particular game, this in and out game is a little more complex than our typical ones. So in the typical ones we see where we just, circle and slash them and that's that. This one, we're having to order the ones that we are picking. So when we pick them, my recommendation is when it talks about ordering them, see which ones are selected, get that kind of out of the way, and then move on to it like a regular ordering game. So we'll kind of go through and pick the ones that we can get selected, select our exact 4, and then we'll move into the ordering aspect of it. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay. So our first rule says only L or T can be assigned to the 3rd spot. Thinking about circle slash, what would you say or do with this rule? Because this rule can be a little bit tricky.
So
What did you say?
wait, so the numbers at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, are those supposed to be like the 19, 21, 22, 23, 24?
Yeah. So rather than writing out 1921, 1922, 1923, the first 3 digits of that year are the same regardless. So I've just shortened it to 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't necessarily need to write the first 3 digits because they're the same in all of the years. So seeing 1 and going 1991, and even the questions when they refer to like the years themselves, it's easy to distinguish them because you can go, okay, they're talking about 1981 or 1921, looking at my first spot, basically.
Oh, okay. In that case, for 3, we could do, wait, is this circle slash? Maybe put the L.
Go down with what you were leading down to.
I was gonna say we could put the L in 3, and then in a different little table we could put the T in 3.
Okay. We're kind of working backwards here, but I will go with it. Okay, so that means that if we put it on this side, that means we're gonna have to circle it on our side. We've picked it, it's been ordered, right? So when we've picked L, when we've written L in our 3rd spot, I'm gonna circle L, and same for T in our 3rd spot, I'm gonna circle T in my 2nd world. Now, here comes the question for you. could they both be selected?
It cut out. Could what be selected?
Could both L and T be selected?
Like at the same time?
Yeah.
No, I think it's one or the other.
Well, yes, talking about the third spot. With the rule, it's talking about one or the other is going to be in that third spot. But does it say that we can only select one or the other in general? Like, could I put, for example, could I put T in my fourth spot in my first world?
Oh yeah, I guess you could put them anywhere.
Yeah, so long as one of them is in that third spot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. Like, it doesn't look like that at first, but technically it's not telling me I have to always pick one or the other. It's only talking about that third spot specifically. So in my first world, how do I want to phrase this without giving it away? If I've selected L, could I also select T in that world?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a copy, one where I select T in that one and one where I don't select T in that one. Because we could have the possibility of T being in or T being out, and we want to reflect that possibility. So I'm going to have one where T is circled, one where T is not. Same question goes for the second world. Could I have L selected with T?
Yes.
Yes. And technically, this is going to get a little confusing because we kind of worked backwards to forward. Technically, if I make my second world, or my fourth world in this case, and select L, I already have that in my first world. Do you see how these are the same now?
Kind of, yeah.
Not focusing on this part, just these two.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So technically what I can do is I can keep this world right here with just T selected and say, okay, that's going to be my world where T, or well, where L is not selected. And my other worlds being L and T can both be selected. I can edit my first world. Instead of saying L has to go there, I can say L or T has to go there.
Okay.
I've kind of like shifted my worlds around a little bit. So the one where L is selected in the third spot is still represented in this, I don't even know what I just drew, in this third world. That's still represented. But in my first world, one of them's going to have to be picked. I just don't know which one's going to go in that third spot. And I'm going to also write our other selection, whichever one we don't pick, is still going to be picked. So I'm going to write it off to the side just to kind of remind myself that that variable is picked. I just don't know the placement of it. Okay, that was kind of a lot. Do you have any questions about that first rule? Okay, we're going to go into actually what I think is helpful in this game is we're going to read our rules, the rest of our rules, because it goes into the more traditional sense of a circle slash rule rather than one of these two variables is going to go in here. So the rest of the game, we can kind of treat it like circle slash. And like I said, we're going to focus on picking our variables first, and then we'll order them later on. So let's go through our rules. And kind of talk about them. So the first rule says if M is assigned to the project, then she must be assigned to 1 or 2. So just focusing on like the circle slash aspect of it, where could I have M?
So M could be in either 1 or 2. Like in the first world, it's either 1 or 2. I guess all of them. They could go in 1 or 2.
Could go in 1 or 2. Could it also not be selected?
Yeah, because it says if. Yeah.
So if I'm just focusing on the circle slash part of it, I basically have M slashed or M is circled. One or the other, right? We'll worry about the placement of M in a second. And let's hold off on going through M in these worlds because we can actually kind of make it a little bit easier on ourselves, because the next rule, if T is assigned to the project, we already know where T is in all of our worlds, right?
Yeah.
So we can we won't have to make duplicate worlds with T. It'll be a little bit easier, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So my third rule says if T is assigned to the project, then R must be assigned to the project. That's a typical in and out rule, right?
Yeah.
So go through your worlds and tell me which worlds does R have to be in, which worlds does R not necessarily have to be in.
So R has to be in 1. And then in 2.
Yeah. What about number 3? Do we know what happens to R in number 3, if anything?
I would say, I guess we don't know because T is out. So technically, couldn't R still be in?
Yeah, you're 100% right. Basically, we don't know, which means R can still do whatever it wants. Because when T is not in, that rule is not saying what happens when T is not in. It's just saying what happens when T is in. So in this case, when T's out, it's just question mark. We don't know what's happening with R. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the third rule. That was simple. We're not having to worry about ordering of them at this point, so good to know. Let's go into the last rule and see if we can flush out which ones are being selected, which ones aren't. So our last rule says if R is assigned to the project, then O must be assigned to the year immediately prior to R. What do you think about that rule?
So O could be in. Well, I guess it could be out too.
Why do you say that?
Because it's saying if, I guess because it's not really relying on Ryan.
Are you talking about like in general, O could be in or out?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. O could be in or out. But when R is in, what has to be in?
Then O is in.
Yeah, it doesn't like directly
So,
say then O is in and next to R. It's kind of like slipped in there that, well, then O has to be next to R. And that kind of like, you just have to assume, well, if it's next to R, then that means that it has to be in. That's a safe assumption to make on the LSAT because that's kind of a given. So in our first world, what can we do with O?
it would be in. So we circle it.
Yep. What about our second world?
We would circle it.
Yeah, because R's in. What about our third world?
So if R is not in, O is not in either.
I think you might be thinking about it too hard. If R is not in, does the rule say what happens when R is not in?
No.
So technically O could be in still with R out because the rule doesn't say what happens when R is out. If there was a rule that said if R is out, then O also has to be out or O has to be in, then we would know. But technically, depending on if R is out, does not force O to go in one or the other. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to create our fourth world because we don't know where R is. R could be in, R could be out, right?
Yes.
And when R is in, we know that O has to be in. And when R is out, we don't really know what happens to our O, right?
Yes.
Now the second part of this rule says that O and R have to be together. O has to be immediately prior to R, right?
Yes.
So we'll kind of dive more into that, but I'm going to write it off to the side just to kind of remember that they have to be in this block. The reason why I'm holding off and why I pushed past that second world is because what happens after we kind of sorted through a majority of our variables, we can only have 4 variables. So rather than flushing out the M rule and going, okay, well, M could be in, M could be out, I'm going to create my second world, I can actually go through my world and count how many I have circled. If I have 4 circled, everything else is out. If I have 3 circled and I only have M as an option or something like that, M has to be in. So we can kind of determine if we have to deal with that rule or not by just counting how many we have in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so in our first world, how many do we have selected?
4.
Which means what?
That means we know that they all have to be in. So we kind of know where they go.
Yeah, we can talk about where they go because M has to be out, right? So we don't have to worry about M being in 1 or 2. But we have this block. And usually I say start with the blocks because you can't pull them apart, right? They're kind of solidified. It's an easy chunk to put in there. Where's the only spot our block could go?
1 and 2.
Yeah. And because we have that floater L or T, whichever one we don't pick, that has to fill my empty spot, right? Boom. This game, the ordering aspect is fairly easy. Usually when it's like a hybrid like this with an in and out, one game type is a little bit easier than others rather it be the ordering aspect or the in and out aspect. This one's a little bit easy on the ordering aspect. Okay, for our second one, how many do we have circled?
3.
So that means we're missing 1, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me which one it has to be?
Would M be in?
Are you questioning that?
Yes. But I'm thinking because Y doesn't really have a rule, but with M, I see 1 circled and 1 slash.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to assume M is in this game.
If it's in, where does it have to, or where could it go? What follows that rule?
It could go in 1 or 2.
So if it has to go in 1 or 2, if we select it, and we have our O and R blocks still, because we still have O and R circled in 2, can M be in?
Oh no, since it can't go in either one of those.
Yeah, because O and R have to go in that 1 and 2 spot, right? That's the only spot that we can put that block in. And because they're taking up 1 and 2, we can assume that M has to be out, which means Y is the one that has to be picked and fill in my empty spot. That was a little advanced. I wanted to see if you were able to do it or not.
Yeah, at first I was like, wait, and then it made sense.
Let's move on to world number 3. How many do we have circled?
3.
So we're missing 1. Lead me through what could happen.
So O and R would go in the first 2.
Right? It's the only place.
And then M would be out since it can't go under 2 or 1, and Y would be in.
Yeah. So if you see what I basically have forced us to do, or what I've done for us, is initially when we started, we didn't know where M was in any of these worlds, right? We could have gone the traditional route and created 4 additional worlds, and M is in one, M is not in the other. But if we take a pause and kind of sort through what we've already done, we can easily figure out where M has to go in some of these worlds. So we've already figured out in the first 3 worlds, M can't happen. That's prevented us from making 3 additional worlds, which is great. And even if we had to make worlds, it takes us 5 seconds to do so. So it's not like a huge, great time saver, but it's still a time saver. Now, I don't think I brought that down. What about world number 4? Who do we have circled?
Just L.
How many do we need? Or I guess since we have 1, who could we circle to complete our 4?
We could circle M, O, and Y.
Yeah, those are the only ones we can circle. Those are the only ones left over. Tell me what you know now.
So now M could either go in 1 or 2. And then
I'll make an M down here. We don't necessarily have to do the arc. What variables are you left with?
then we have Y and O.
Do we care about where they go?
No.
No, because like you said earlier, there's no rule that's been attached to Y. So Y is a floater throughout this entire game. And as far as O goes, it's only attached or it's only assigned, kind of placed in a bubble when R is in. And in this case, R is excluded. So technically in this world, it has no attachment to any variable. So we don't care about where they go. So they flip-flop between one another. That's the game.
Ooh, woohoo.
It's a little bit more of a challenge. But I promise, this is about as difficult as in and out games get, because you have an ordering aspect to them. So if you can conquer this, you can pretty much conquer any in and out game.
Good to know.
Do you have any questions before we move into the questions?
Nope.
Okay. Let's go into our questions. Our first question is a list question. So as usual, I'm taking our worlds off the screen because I say that your list questions, go through the rules, eliminate the ones that are violating them. That's the easiest way to do it. So give you a little bit to go over 6.
It is C. I mean C.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we wanted to double check our worlds, which world does this match?
The first one.
Yep, we can make that happen. So we are good there. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, I'm a little confused on this one because I'm looking at the last world, but I know it must be true. I feel like the answer could be B, C, or yeah, B or C. Well, or D. I mean E.
I figured you would be stuck between these two. So this question is worded a little bit differently. It's worded in a way that we usually don't see it too often, or at least we haven't talked about too often in class or in general. But technically, it's which one's not true? You might be reading it. It's kind of like a backwards must be true, if that makes sense. So rather than like in a typical must be true, it's usually if this variable is in this place, what must be true? This one is kind of taking a different approach to it and saying M has to be in 2 if which one of the following is true. So let's look through our answer choices and see, does that have to force M into my second place? That's kind of what we're looking for. So in B, does M force itself into 2 if O is assigned to 1? In every world I have O and 1, is M forced to be in 2?
No.
No, we have 3 worlds to prove that wrong right there when R is in. So because O and 1 doesn't force automatically M to happen in 2, that's wrong. You might be, I think what may have caused your trip up is, well, I could have O here and it forces M into 2 worlds, but it's not doing it in all my other worlds. Looking at C, O being in my 4th position, does that make M in my 2nd position?
So it's E.
Yeah. Because when I put Y in my 1st position, I have to have M in my 2nd position. I don't have another world where I have Y in a 1st position. I have another world where O is in a 4th position and M is in my 1st. I have another world where O is in my 1st position. L and T just don't even really have a chance because they're just always flip-flopping. It doesn't force anything to happen with M. So that's why Y is our answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little different than I feel like a typical must be true looks like. Okay. Let's go on to the next one.
It's A.
Yeah. This one's kind of an easy one to get through, mainly because it's the first answer choice. But when I have R and Y, I could have L in my third position right here. R and Y are in there. When I have R and Y, I'm only looking at these two worlds, which means we don't have M. O has to be assigned to 1. T doesn't necessarily have to be in 4, and in fact, it can't be in 4, so that's wrong. And Y has to be in 4. So again, that's wrong. Any questions about that one? Okay. Okay, next one.
It is D.
Which one?
D.
Oh my gosh. Yes, you're right. I was looking at the second column and I was like, no, there's 4. We're looking at 1921. So we have O, M, and Y could be in there. So I love questions like that because all you have to do is count. So easy. Okay. Next one.
It is E.
Yep. The only world which is really nice in this case where Y is not assigned to the project is this first one. So it's the only world that we can look at, which is really nice. Everything else can't be true. O has to be in 1. T and L have to be included, and so does R. So that leaves us with E because it can flip-flop between L and T on 4. Okay. We have one more. Okay. Yeah, this is the last one. Last one.
It is A.
Yep. For 1922, I could have R, I could have O, I could have Y, I could have M, which eliminates R, O, Y, M, and leaves us with A as L. Okay. Any questions about this?
Nope.
Cool. Cool. I think this one was a little bit challenging, but I think once we got through it, the questions became pretty easy.
How did you know again? Like, how do you know when you could do the in and out method versus like a different method?
Like a regular grouping method. So what we have to remember is the in and out is essentially grouping. It's just 2 groups. And so when you see like a typical grouping game, when like Seven Sage or the Demon talks about grouping games, it's usually like 3 or more groups. You have like these 3 or 4 groups that you're ordering. They start to identify them as in and out when you only have 2 groups. So it's the same kind of thing as you're thinking about your variables are going into this place or this place. Those are your only 2 groups. And this one specifically, I can see that from pen. Oh, I've got it upside down. Each of the 4 years will have exactly 1 student assigned, but I have 6 students. So that automatically tells me I don't have numbers matching up. I only have 4 spots and I have 6 students. That means that 2 of them can't be selected. So you can kind of get from that you're going to have an in and out because you're going to have 4 selected, you're going to have 4 that are not selected. Typically, this game, I mean, you could use circle slash with this one, obviously, and I think it's helpful, But honestly, every time I've done this game, I've always done 1, 2, 3, 4, like a typical T-chart, which I hate T-charts. I don't know why I always go towards that method for this game, but you can do it this way too. You have two groups, group A, group B. So when you notice or catch yourself making a tree, or not a tree diagram, a T table where you have group 1, group 2, that's when you can transform it into a circle slash method.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, most of these in and out games are going to say something like only X amount of players can be selected from the 10 players or something like that. Some of the more tricky ones are going to say something along the lines of, I know there's one game that I absolutely like. I like Circle Slash. It makes games a lot easier, but this game is just long. There's a game that's like you have photographers and they can either photograph this university or this university. So it's not telling you like I have to select 4 to photograph this university. It's saying they're either going to go to this university or this university. So when you're selecting a certain amount that's not matching up with your variables, or you have 2 options that you can group them into, that's when you do circle slash.
Okay.
The other kind of key indicator is all, if not, or some, if not all of them are going to have these if then statements as rules. That's kind of another key indicator.
Okay. Perfect.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. Alrighty then. All right, well, I don't have anything else. We're about 15 minutes early, so
Enjoy.
yeah, enjoy the Saturday. I don't know about you, but I've got like 70-degree weather here, which is really nice. So
It's finally warm, so I'm ready. But I've had a headache. I think maybe I've just been sitting and on the computer too long. So I'm probably just gonna go lay down because it's so killer. And I took medicine, but I just feel like it hasn't kicked in yet.
yeah,
I'm just gonna go.
if you don't feel your best, it's really hard to study, especially when you have a headache. Like, that's really difficult. So, all right, well, get some rest. Let me know if you have
Yes,
any
thank you.
questions in the future.
Perfect, and happy early birthday.
Thank you. So excited. All right. Well, I will see you. I think you're signed up for
Next Wednesday.
probably. I don't know. I'll see you in the future.
Okay, have a great night.
Bye.